What is up, everybody? Happy Thursday, or happy Wednesday to everyone. Typically we do these on Thursdays, but thank you all for joining. We have got some very, very interesting discussions for today. So this week on our Bonfire and Bonafide Conversations, we are having Dr. Michael Berstein from Stanford University on to talk about some really interesting topics as far as crowd research goes and some of the work that he's done as far as making strides into democratizing research to the greater good. And so he's going to be on at 6:30, but what I would like to do before then is to put together a brief presentation that kind of gives some background on what he worked on, the paper that we're going to be covering, and kind of bring everyone up to speed so that when we do get there, everyone will be able to provide some good questions and really have more context on what we're going to be talking about, because it's a really cool topic, and I'm very passionate about it. I think it's great. And so I'm going to quickly run through this presentation, and then 6:30 he will be on. So at any point, I've tried to set this up to where people could see the other people that are in the meeting. I don't know if it's working or not, but the chat is there, so please ask any questions as you're going. I'll do my best to answer. If not, we'll hold it from him. So I'm going to go kind of quick so that we can get through all of this. So let's get into it. So again, Bonafide Conversations. Glad to have everyone here. This is who we're going to be having. Dr. Michael Berstein, Associate Professor in Human-Computer Interaction. He got a bachelor degree in Symbolic Systems from Stanford, and then a PhD in Computer Science from MIT. So, smart dude. And what we're going to be covering is this topic called, this research project that came out called Crowd Research. And it basically was saying, can we create an open and scalable research lab and basically have everyone around the world contribute simultaneously to a research project? And if so, how would we do that? How do we manage that at scale? And what are some of the features that we can put in? And ultimately, will it be a success? So the paper describes crowd research as introducing it's kind of these process and tools to crowdsource and coordinate a large group of people in an open-ended research exploration, which is pretty interesting. As well, and this part is really cool, and I know some people around here are going to love this, is the decentralized credit distribution. So if you have everyone simultaneously contributing to a project, how do you know how to attribute credit? And if you have, in this case, thousands of people reporting into one instructor, like how they can't know everyone on a personal basis. There's no way to track who did what that well. And so what they did was create this decentralized credit economy that let them track and at the end be able to provide contributions where needed. If we take a step back and look at it, so crowd research, and as the title says, is essentially two things. It's process, so it's how do you task, and how do you source, and how do you bring all this work together where you might have 1,000 people working on one milestone, and how do you crunch all of their work down and determine which gets merged in, what actually goes into it. And so it's the process behind that. And then also on the other side, the tools. So this is the decentralized credit. This is how people determine who did the best and most work, so that they can be attributed at the end of the project. And so I'm going to quickly cover both of these, and this will kind of set us up to talk to Dr. Berstein when he comes in. But ultimately, stepping back, why did Stanford and all of these these researchers do this? What's the point of it? And so really at the top of it is that systemically scientific research is kind of broken, in that it really does not do justice, and it underrepresents minorities in developing regions. So typically it's only the very high end schools that people get into that are able to even participate in this research, right? And as the world is today, that's fundamentally broken. So being able to open that up to anyone, anywhere, no matter where you are, is a really special thing and a very critical thing that we need to work on. The other part too is that if you're able to bring in all of these diverse points of view, ultimately you end up getting better solution. And research has shown that diverse problem solvers outperform groups of highly able problem solvers. So the more points of view that you get on something, and the way that you're able to crunch it all in, you ultimately come up with a better solution than just a small subset of people. And then finally is to create a way to incentivize and provide contributors with impact. So if you're someone from a up and coming region, or you're from some underserved minority or demographic, like having Stanford or having someone be able to contribute you on a research paper that you did without getting there is huge. Like that's massive. And so creating that fair and balanced structure to provide that is really what a lot of this went through, and a lot of the kind of drivers behind it. I mean, there's a lot of like tertiary benefits in that, engaging in research increases the probability of STEM graduates. So it feeds back into this kind of cycle, which is really, really interesting. So to kind of start broad, to give everyone kind of a scope on what's going on here, is that this is what the structure ends up looking like. So you have a principal investigator, which is one of the researchers. They have an RA, and they are basically, you can think about it like on, above all of this, and they're kind of orchestrating. And then below that, they have, in the paper, they've had up to 1,500 individual participants participating in a research project. And so what they do is after the first couple milestones, they'll basically see who has been contributing and investing the most, and then they'll promote them to what they call directly responsible individuals, and it kind of forms this narrow hierarchical structure. But this is the way that they're able to basically determine who should be there, and then kind of scale this really quickly. So again, this is imagine you being one person and 1,500 people show up to work, and you have to manage all of them. Like that's crazy, but by doing this and through technology and through some of these means, they're able to. So basically how it works is that they run on 1 week milestone basis. So at the beginning of the milestone, the principal investigator will say, this is what we want to accomplish. All of the different teams go back during that week and perform some work. This is typically like a 5 to 10 hour amount of work milestone. On the 6th day, they submit their work in, and then all of their peers peer review and peer upvote, kind of like a Reddit style, on what the best work is. And this lets the principal investigator quickly see where they should be focusing their attention. And so this is how they're able to, again, kind of scale really quickly and aggregate a lot of this work really, really fast and really, really accurately. So this is, again, the kind of overview of the submission. I'm running through this really quick. I can share this presentation after, but we've got about 5 more minutes, so I just want to make sure I get through all of it there. So that's essentially a high level of what the process is. I think it's a pretty straightforward kind of Scrum, agile way to go about stuff, right? And now for the tool part. So the big part and problem in doing all of this is like, how do you know who was the top contributors, or how do you contribute who is an author based on trying to determine who provided the most work, and really objectively doing that through trying to just measure data points is really difficult because it can be gamed and stuff. And so what they've done is basically created this economy model where every participant and every milestone is given 100 credits, and they can kind of give those out to who they want to. They can give 5 here, 20 here, 30 here. And essentially what it creates is this weighted graph where nodes are participants and the edges are the amount of credits that they have given someone else. And so if you take this graph, you're able to basically deduce down like a credit score. And the credit score in this sense is not like an Equifax credit score, but it's a credit to who gets on the author's page and who gets on the contributor's page of the white paper once it's published into a journal. And so this is how they're using it to filter down and really track and understand it. And by doing it on this peer basis, you bring into the human factor, which tends to be a lot better in these cases than than trying to just strictly do it through like counting lines of code or counting number of messages. But in doing this, and this is something that we've seen actually before, and some people that are in here that have played with the credit or Karma or into any of those kind of distributed or decentralized systems will know that there's some problems, and they faced basically 2 that they had to try to guard against. And so one was creating these link rings where all of the credit kind of gets centralized within like a couple different nodes, and then the other ones are basically strategically directing credit towards someone. So me and all my cronies might get together and say all of this credit goes to Bob, because why not? And so these are basically ways to game the system. And so what they did was basically come up, and I'm going to have to read this off of my notes because it's a bit beyond me. But basically, what they do is they use graph centrality via PageRank because that allows them to capture the concept of a universally recognized participant. So that's how they're coming up with some of the credit stuff. And then PageRank propagates the scores equally across all the outgoing links, which is probably kind of here more. But as far as them overcoming the quid pro quo attack and link rings by manipulating the PageRank dampening factor, so they have a dampening factor on the page ranking algorithm, and that basically by limiting the fraction of a node's score that it can pass to any individual outlink. So basically, they're putting dampeners saying that like you can't, like I couldn't dump Bob all 100 credits. Like so, it's there's some level that it has to be like allocated separately, and so by doing that, they're able to kind of get past it. And so we've got one more minute. I hope Dr. Berstein has the right thing, but at the end of the day, like, was it a success? Absolutely. They got multiple papers published. The big part is that most of the participants didn't have access to research opportunities before, which is huge. 74% of the institutions ranked below the 500 worldwide. So the Times has like the World University rankings, and so 74% of those were under the 500, and yet they're still getting these great papers published in some very highly regarded journals. I won't read all the stats again. I'll share this afterwards, but overall, like it was a huge success, and they were able to again kind of democratize this opportunity to research programs to a lot of people that typically wouldn't have it. And a lot of these people that participated got recommendation letters from the principal investigators at Cornell, at Stanford, right? And out of the 33 that got recommendation letters or that sent in for them, 21 received an offer from an institution or a company that they applied to. So that the way that this helped open up opportunity was just fantastic. And so let's see, it is 6:30 now. I really hope that he has the right calendar link. But to continue on, the project that Dr. Berstein worked on specifically, or that kind of he ran through all of this, was this human-computer interaction. So I'll let you read this here. So they were wanting to specifically come up with a new crowdsourcing network, right? And with that, just making sure that he has the right link. And with that, how could they come up with a new crowdsourcing marketplace via this crowdsourcing method? So kind of drink your own champagne, dog food, whatever you may have it. And essentially, it ended up working. They created this company called Demo, and they got it off the ground, and it all worked. So overall, sorry. Let's see. Today. Sorry, guys. You're right. I had created a calendar thing. He's got one of those like Calendly or something, and it created 2 invites, and I was just hoping that he got the correct one. So this is, again, the backstory. We're going to be talking with him here in a few minutes through some of these things and kind of getting asking some questions and getting some deeper insights into it. And then after that, we've got some giveaways. We're doing Philips Hue bulbs this week, a Philips Hue starter kit. So it should be pretty cool. Let's see here. Should have some like waiting elevator music to play in the background. All right, so I'm on both my... Oh, there he is. Dr. Berstein, you are in. Awesome. All right, so I need to make you a promote to panelist. Boom, you're giving all admin rights now. Can you hear me?
Yes.
There we go.
Yes, sorry.
How are you?
I was in the room, but couldn't say much.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out exactly how all the the Zoom webinar stuff that works
Yeah.
and making it all set up. So thank you so much for joining today. I really appreciate the time. And just to kind of give you some context, I kind of just went through and put together kind of a synopsis and background, on the crowd research paper, and kind of have given everyone, a little bit of backstory on, what the project was about, and, a little bit of info on you. And so, I think that, from here, if we just kind of wanted to start with some introductions, from your end, then, I have some questions lined up, and I'm sure hopefully, we'll have some coming from the other attendees as well. So thank you again for coming, and yeah, leave it over to you.
Yeah, my pleasure. And thanks for the invitation. So for those of you who I haven't met before, my name is Michael Berstein. I'm an associate professor of computer science at Stanford. And a lot of my research is focused on what we call social computing systems. Basically means any technology that's mediating social interaction, collaboration, anything like that. So it could be everything from down the scale, like how do teams work? How do we make teams work better? How does Zoom work? How do we make Zoom work better? How does Slack work? How do we make Slack work better? How does Facebook, Wikipedia, Snapchat, any of these things, crowdsourcing platforms? We're interested in how to build a future that helps people work together rather than come apart at the seams. Some of the research that we've done basically was an early version of what sort of Gigster is now, thinking about expert teams drawn together through the internet, people who may have never met before, showing that there's futures there, but also thinking about like what's the futures required for like a pro-social outcome, like how do we ensure worker collective action in these kinds of environments, how do we ensure fair wages, so we built systems supporting that kind of stuff as well. Yeah, so is that kind of the angle
Yeah,
you were thinking about?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, we've got a kind of a mix of people here from a few different backgrounds. And I think that this topic definitely hits home with everyone. I know that especially being, a part of Gigster and part of the kind of crowd thing for a while now, the research and the white paper and stuff was a fascinating read. It was a really cool thing. And I know that it's a couple years old and probably working on some, much more exciting things now. But with that, this idea of democratizing opportunity, and especially in this one, democratizing the opportunity for research, right? To a lot of, minorities or developing nations, or typically people that wouldn't have access to, to work on a research project with Stanford or with MIT, or who all of these people, and developing a program and the tools that really enabled it. And it seemed to be very successful, was a huge accomplishment, in my opinion. And so I'm glad to see that it went well. And so, something that has been always, I guess, kind of at the forefront, of Gigster, and, with a lot of people on the call, is that idea of the social good, and how can technology give back, and how can technology be there to help, make things ultimately better and not worse. And so it seems that, this was really kind of a testament to that ability. So with that, going through, I in all honesty had to ping our network with some clarifications on the paper and how the PageRank algorithm and all that was working. But, I think that, outside of that, I'm not sure, where, I know that your part of the paper was that you were running the human computer interaction project, right, through it. And so I'm not sure where, you had kind of started and stopped as far as the research on the back end, but there was definitely some questions that I had for it. So if you don't mind, I'd like to kind of run through some of these, and then, if anyone else, anyone else out there has any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. Would love to see what you're thinking about it. And so, yeah, so just to, to kind of dive right into it, is that one of the first things that I thought was really, really interesting, and this is something that, I had discussed with Katharina quite a bit on some of the research that she's doing, into the karma and the teen space. But, in the paper, it said, while we initially experimented with a system of that randomized the double-blind assignment, anonymous feedback was needlessly negative and evaluative. Instead, we shifted to a system where participants' names, submissions, and feedback were all public. Participants chose to give feedback to prompting a more positive environment. Like this is kind of like this weird dichotomy of where, I think it holds true to a lot of people that have been on the internet, but like, it seems that like once you're kind of public and facing, and once they know who you are, right, it becomes much more constructive. But what I am curious about is that, did you notice that once you did make it public, did you see an increased rate of responses or feedback? Like were more people participating, or when it was anonymous, were you getting a lot more, participation in it?
It's a good question. I'm not sure I strongly remember we have to sort of keep in mind what the goals were of the project, right? We are doing research, but we're also teaching, we're also mentoring. That was, those were explicit goals. And so anonymous feedback can be a valuable thing for making people feel comfortable speaking, up to power, so to speak. Like if my students, they should be able to be anonymous to give me feedback so that I'm not going to go after them, right? Not that I would, but they don't have to be worried that I would. And so with volunteers and people who are trying to learn, it just didn't seem helpful to be shoving them through a peer review where they're told everything that's wrong. It seemed like keeping people happy and around longer, they would learn more than getting more direct feedback. I don't know whether we got more feedback. We did ask for it. It was sort of like part of the process. And so the reason why I can't give you a firm answer is that you had some drop off happening throughout the process of crowd research. You get a bunch of people signing up, and then some people do it for a few weeks, and then life gets crazy. And it would have been hard to disentangle how much of that trade is that drop is due to just natural attrition over time, like you'd see in anything like a MOOC or an open source project,
Sure.
versus people saying more, being more positive. The literature would suggest that, I guess, certainly the more welcoming you find the community, the more likely you are to feel comfortable posting, right? If I'm in some Gigster Slack channel and I'm like, hey, everybody, and then they're just like, shut up, like, I'm not going to say much.
Of course. No, of course. Absolutely. No, that's a good one. And it's, the idea of running these essentially kind of like social networks, right? But in the meat of producing something and not just extraction of value, like I don't know if it can like a Facebook or an Instagram, but where actually work is being produced, I think is fascinating as far as the different things that you need to pay attention to. And something here that I thought was really, really fascinating was the credit system, right? And how you're using basically peer feedback to regulate, almost horizontally at scale, this network. And so being, the part about being, each participant's given 100 credits and then they kind of give those out who they want, was kind of an interesting way to handle that. I mean, when you were going through it, I mean, was there learnings in the credits part throughout the way, or did it kind of out of the gate we were like, we know how this, we have a pretty firm idea on how regulation of this crowd at scale is going to work, or was it a very like stumble through it kind of thing over the 2-year program?
It's a good question, and maybe we should ask Rajan, who is a postdoc who really led a lot of this effort, and his memory may be different than mine. My memory is that we started out with something that integrated with Slack easily. It was basically a kudos kind of system where I had an unlimited budget and I could just be like, thanks, Corey, you rock. But that didn't have a ton of usage. And the usage that I did have seemed to have just kind of like an immediate like super inflation of the currency, so to speak, where it just, you weren't getting a lot of information. And the challenge we were having was that ultimately we need to decide, who's included like as a co-author in the paper. and who's not, like who's above the bar, so to speak, which can have massive consequences in terms of what I can write in terms of a letter of recommendation for them, or all sorts of things like that.
Sure.
So I don't remember exactly the path that we came that led us to this credit system, but it essentially was trying to democratize or decentralize um, the articulation of who's really being valuable here. The idea that
Mm-hmm.
Me as a PI who was trying to sort of shepherd the group and lend my expertise as a mentor and as a researcher in the area, I don't actually see everything because not everyone speaks the same language. Some people don't feel comfortable, they'd rather just write code but not join the meetings, these kinds of things. And so allowing that credit to sort of percolate out through the group seemed like a good fit. I will
Mm-hmm.
say that there was differences in how well this thing was absorbed based on how technical the person was. Corey, you and Katharina might have had some conversations about this. It led to some of the ideas in a study that you were helping us prototype, where when the evaluation was getting run through PageRank,
Mm-hmm.
at some point people just basically viewed it as a black box, and thus they didn't trust it.
Right.
Whereas somehow, if it were just a pure vote,
Mm-hmm.
it was just like a clearer mental model for them.
Right.
Another example of this is that where you have like gerrymandering and the Supreme Court, right? People are like saying, oh, this thing is gerrymandered. And then the Supreme Court's like, well, give me a definition of gerrymandering that's easy to understand.
Right.
And that like and so I think once the model became confusing to people, I definitely got more pushback. So that was a negative trade-off. That the PageRank approach, I think when we looked at what it did, it was good. Like what it did was it made it less of a popularity contest.
Right.
And also, adjusted. So for example, the concrete, as an example of that, the concrete actions like pushing code, leading groups, and so on, those people got upweighted via the PageRank process because of how this all worked out. And then the people who were talking a lot, but perhaps doing less of those other activities, while they still did fairly well, they were not quite as well as they were through just a straight vote.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So you had some people who were very valuable, not necessarily to the group, not necessarily through the concrete, research contributions they made in the traditional sense, like through writing the paper, writing code, et cetera. But they were valuable in terms of they were the glue of the community. They were very active on Slack.
Right.
And so as a result, what you would have is, if you just took a raw vote, those people would end up being near the top of the author list. And if you talk to the people who were at the top of the author list, they all felt that this was kind of unfair because these individuals, didn't spend hours and hours actually writing the paper or writing code. And yet they were up near the top because they were just visible. They were sort of engagement hacking. And so the PageRank approach did help in that sense. It sort of normalized that a bit more because the people who were the leaders knew, and so they gave them a little less credit, still a fair amount, but a little less credit, and then that sort of percolated through.
Gotcha. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I was trying to place, I guess, some of that backstory within the paper in the context of the introduction against it, and it seemed really interesting around like I think it's you're heading with like the dampening functions that they applied to it, so it would kind of it would lessen the spikes, I guess, in returns. So with that, we've got a question. I know that we're bumping up on like 10 minutes left, so I want to make sure that we get to all of these. Is that, did you find that there was a threshold where once participants received a certain level of credit that boosted their overall contributions and quality from then onwards? So I'm assuming that was there like a tipping point where once they were, I guess, this popular, it just kind of like skyrocketed? Is that, it's from Umberto? Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing I would mention is that our credit distributions were sort of summative in the sense that they happened at the end. So we
Hmm.
submitted a paper, and at the point at which we submitted the paper, in fact, right after we submitted it, I believe, or right as we were coming up on the deadline, um, people would submit their credit allocations. It was sort of a
Got it.
big process. And so you definitely had some people who boosted their contribution right as that was happening. Uh, kind of, it's the sort of like, oh, the election's coming up. I better like, be more visible.
Right, right, right.
Is the
Yeah.
cynical way that some members of the group, felt it was being handled. Um, the I think it did serve as validation for many members that others around them appreciated it.
Hmm.
Uh, there were, I will say that I definitely heard more. The people who were more willing to talk to me were the people who were unhappy, and these were people who generally thought they were like going to be second author and ended up like seventh because again they maybe were make their sense of their contributions to the project were overblown compared to what everyone else thought they had contributed to the project.
Right, 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 right. So, yeah, self-identity saying I'm doing way more than.
Yeah, so those people generally didn't, slow down, but it did do some combination of lighting a fire under them and make them feel, I guess they were not happy about it, right?
Hmm.
Um, everyone can't be number one,
Right, right,
and
of course.
uh, there were definitely some people who had what I would consider to be sort of inflated expectations of their position
Country. Right, right.
in the project, and I generally tended to agree with the outcomes,
Hmm.
but you know again some individuals didn't. I think anytime you're doing an evaluation, same way when I'm a professor, like some people are like, I'm totally getting an A in this class, and then you get the project back and it's like a B, and you're like,
Hmm. Yeah.
no effing way, right?
Yeah, right,
And
right.
they're really, they're unhappy
Right,
about
right.
it, and
Sure.
it's because that's the moment in which the evaluation came home. um,
Interesting.
so yeah, there's trade-offs in every direction there. Um,
Because I
but
would
we
say that
had,
like,
go ahead.
sorry. Yeah, so I mean, I would say that like overall, like even the disgruntled employee right complex is something that I think gets handled everywhere, but overall the program, and reading a lot of the stats and in the ways that it enabled, again, what I find so cool about this is how it gave so much um, access to research opportunities. I was reading some stats earlier that 74% of the participants were at institutions ranked below the 500 worldwide, right? And
Hmm.
66% were in countries ranked below the 50 in GDP per capita. And so being able to really open this up and get everyone involved in a lot of those very like diverse ideas, in my opinion, seems incredibly powerful and seem would outweigh, I think, a few of those. I mean, with that being the case, I mean, do you see like this methodology or like this practice of of being applied or continuing to be applied in the research area, or was it kind of the study and then it stopped, or has it continued?
So I kind of have double vision here. There's definitely been a continued interest in doing this. Um, we, because the postdoc who was driving it in my group finished their postdoc, there hasn't been capacity within my group to continue to organize it.
Hmm.
But we've certainly reached out to several PIs being like principal investigators, the
Sure.
faculty who are interested in doing this, and we continue to get emails from people who want to be involved. So I think that there's certainly capacity. The one thing I would say as someone who organized it is that it required more of my time and mind space than say mentoring a PhD student would, right?
Gotcha.
You're not
Okay.
doing this. You're probably not doing this solely to publish more papers,
Hmm.
because if you're doing that, you're probably gonna you're better off taking a PhD student and mentoring them once and they remember everything you say, hopefully. But there's this curve, right? Like I think this increases equity outcomes, right?
Hmm.
And you go in directions with it that you wouldn't have gone with your first year PhD student, right? Your PhD student is probably coming from some university that's relatively well known, went through a traditional education system, that like their perspectives are fairly correlated with yours. But here the group had so many different perspectives, it really pushed me in different directions. And that's what I thought was really valuable as well, aside from the mentorship. It was like the projects we did were just qualitatively different.
Hmm. That's awesome. That's really cool to hear. I mean, obviously I think that you're, kind of aware with like some of our background, but again, kind of running on that idea of the crowd, right? And being able to kind of like harness, the world engine, or the world, the world brain, or however you want to call it, is something that's absolutely intriguing. And I think that going into especially into the future, is that being able to harness that. And I think that we've seen a lot of companies, doing that more and more. You're the one that you had started during the project. I don't know if I'm gonna mispronounce it, but the
Demo, yeah.
Demo, yeah, was cool to read about. That was awesome. It was cool to see that you were able, like, this was applied, or it seemed like the process or methodology was applied to not just the research area, but that it was also applied to like engineering, right? So actually building something, which is, I think, a lot of relevant to where I live, and what goes on to see that works is pretty cool. And how that can apply to a lot of different ways. Again, the whole credit and contribution thing to the open source software space, and kind of beyond, is pretty cool. But with that, we're getting close on time here. I would love to hear about some of the the recent work that you're doing, in the space. So like, what is some of like the bleeding edge stuff that you can let us in on?
Yeah, well, a couple of things that we did after this. One has been thinking about team structures. So how do we help teams work better together rather than huge crowds? Ultimately they split up into small teams. We ended up building some systems and algorithms that help a team sort of answer the question, like, should we be flat or hierarchical? Should we be like nice to each other, or more like sort of, call it like it is, like all these team structures, building a system that helps teams sort of rapidly self-experiment, like try out different approaches. And it's got this network of multi-armed bandits in the background that's learning what's working well for the team based on their feedback or their performance or whatever, and saying, okay,
Right.
what if you try this? What if you try that? In some field experiments we did, the teams, there was like a 40% increase in in this case we were measuring performance, but you obviously want to measure yeah, viability, happiness, essentially, as well. So some really, really big opportunities there.
Mm-hmm.
We've also been looking at why remote collaborations fall apart. Was it inevitable, right? Like if
Oh, interesting.
we've all had this experience where like we get to the end of a team project and everyone's sort of quietly like, yeah, not gonna work with them again.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we've been building software that allows us, by sort of masking people's pseudonyms, to bring the same team back together without them realizing they're working with the same people, so that we can
Oh,
understand, do they come out to the same outcomes or not? Do they like love each other one time but hate each other the next time?
oh,
And then
fascinating.
also trying to train some models on top of that to predict whether the team's going to be strongly viable,
Mm-hmm.
or to allow the team to do some team dating where they're trying out different teams, but where again we're sort of inserting the same team multiple times and with different masks on, and they don't realize. Then we sort of, with their consent, we can then pull out the one that worked the best and say, "Oh yeah,
Okay.
here you go. Go for this."
Ah, very cool.
Um,
Interesting. That's awesome. That's really, really cool. I might ping around. I might ping you for some more info
cool.
around those, because that sounds awesome, and I think very close to home where we are. With that, I know that we're bumping up on time here, and I know that you have a very busy schedule. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining our
Sure.
Bonfire and Bonafide Conversations series. It was very much appreciated. I know everyone here thought it was great, and so yeah, thank you again, everyone.
My pleasure.
Maybe a round of applause. I need to get like the background applause like they have for the NFL and stuff now, or they do like the
Yeah.
fake applause. Uh, would be cool. So All right. Well, with that, we're gonna get to some giveaways. So yeah, Dr. Bernstein, again, thank you so much, and look forward to chatting again soon, man.
See you later. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
All right, fun stuff, huh? And so with that, let's give away some Hue bulbs. Good times, folks. That was fun, right? That's some good info, some good background on what's going on in the future of teams and developments of that nature. All right, let me get over here with Keith to pull the name out of the hat. Keith. And Justin. Pinkar. Congratulations, man. Getting a set of Hue bulbs. Coming straight to you. Have set up some sweet lighting like so. So thanks for joining. Yeah, with that, everyone, thank you so much for joining. This was a lot of fun. I love doing these. So if anyone has any other topics that you would like to go through or talk about, please let me know. Would love to cover more in any area, any vertical. Like I said, so much fun, and look forward to seeing you all on the next one. And with that, Keith, do the outro thing.